Now I invite Dr. Karubi Lahari we're going back to go forward. We're talking now about the examination techniques, screening protocols, and risk factors for ROP.
Good morning, everybody. Thank you, Anand, for making me part of your IC. I talked to you about the risk factors, examination techniques, and screening protocols in ROP. These are several children, some better weight, better birth weight, some worse birth weight, right up to 26 weeker and 750 grams. But the younger the child is, we know that they are afflicted by multi-system disorders, including the lungs, where they can get asthma, and this asthma-like symptoms can go on throughout life. Intestinal problems like necrotizing enterocolitis, infections like pneumonia and meningitis, vision problems we all know is the ROP, and various fulminant forms of ROP, the hearing loss, and the dental problems. Now, we know that the normal risk factors which accompany this ROP process is the low gestational age, the low birth weight, the administration of oxygen, and anemia and blood transfusions for the same are listed amongst the important risk factors. RDS, that is RDS consequent IVH, that is intraventricular hemorrhages, and surfactant therapy or lack of surfactants is another important cause for ROP formation. Apnea and bag mask ventilation is another cause. Now, where we talk about the systemic factors, increasing risk of ROP is seen in asphyxia, hypoxia, hyper and hypocarbia, hyperglycemia, acidosis, alkalosis, jaundice, sepsis, convulsions, shock, and use of dopamine. There are certain putative risk factors like all these IVF babies, and this is on the rise nowadays, the incidence of multiple births as a result of that, so smaller babies, and these babies are prone to develop ROP, and the percentage is almost 32% of children developing ROP. Cerebral palsy is also one of the leading causes. Independent risk factors are those of the patent ductus arteriosus, the early intubations and the bronchopulmonary dysfunction, hypotension, and beta blockers administration to the mother, and sepsis, especially Candida sepsis. Now, favorable, we won't call it risk factors, favorable factors are the occurrence of preeclampsia in the mother, administration of steroids, administration of vitamin E, human milk, and phototherapy. So knowing the underlying etiology and modification of the risk factors go a long way towards prevention of disease at prenatal or at early postnatal levels, thereby reducing the incidence of ROP. Now, when we talk about this, we have to go back and say what can happen if you prevent ROP, that is the maternal infections and inflammations, if they are prevented at the time of the surgery, along with certain factors like diabetes, blood pressure, preeclampsia, and these are catered to, or infections are catered to. They go a long way in prevention of prematurity, so prevention of ROP. And other risk factors like smoking, drinking, chemical use, the age and race of the child, the girl who's getting married at 17 or less than 17, and stress and low socioeconomic status. These are also all bugbears for development of prematurity in a child. Delivery room management risks run from cold stress, difficulty with transitions, and thereby the lung immaturity and RDS. And the incidence of intracranial hemorrhages and potential for oxygen-related injuries are also very common things. Then thermoregulation, GI issues, and acid-base disorders, pain management, developmental of issues due to CNS, and impact of the NIC environment are further factors which also predispose. So these are independent factors like the RDS. This is seen in mostly diabetic mothers and multiple gestations, and due to surfactant being less. And apnea is there in 50% of the NICU children. If a child has a IVH or PVH, 50% will die, and many of them land up with neurological deficits, and it affects the brain also. So learning, behavior, physical development, and behavioral problems are a common accompaniment. Now coming to the clinical practice guidelines of 2010 by the Neonatology Forum, all infants weighing less than 17-15 grams at birth and less than 34 weeks at the period of gestation are prone. But heavier babies, 1750 to 2000, or older babies, 34 to 36, are screened depending upon the attending risk factors like mechanical ventilation, prolonged oxygen therapy, hemodynamic instability, adverse respiratory and cardiac disease profile. Larger babies are also known, and this can be because of anemia and absence of neonatal steroids given to the mother. Now we have all these classifications. The ICROP 1 was in 84, ICROP 2 was in 88, a revisited ICROP was in 2005, and now the recent one, the ICROP 3, which is 2023. The earlier one, as you know, it described 3 zones, that is zone 1, zone 2, zone 3, and it also had the number of clock hours of effect, and the extent was by the staging of the disease. Now the staging of the disease was ran as to stage 1 to stage 5, and there were further classifications of aggressive posterior ROP, threshold disease, pre-threshold disease, and the threshold and pre-threshold are not used much commonly now in the post-ICROP era. The stages of ROP, the severity. I mean, we all know the old classification of the demarcation line, the thickened ridge with blood vessels arborizing, the extraretinal fibrovascular proliferation was 3. 4th was either extrafoveal detachment or foveal detachment. But now stage 5 in the new classification has been divided into 3 groups. That is 5A, which is where the optic disc is seen, stage B, where it is not seen because of the retrolental tissue, and 5C, where it is accompanied by anterior segment changes of a shallow anterior chamber and corneal opacification. So these were the stages. That is the demarcation, the stage 2, it thickens with vessels arborizing. Then it goes from 2 to 3, where there are blood vessels which start growing beyond the retina, and the 4, with is 4A detachments, 4B detachments, and the stage 5. The plus disease is marked dilatation, tortuosity of retinal vessels in at least 2 quadrants of the posterior pole, and pre-plus is something less than that, but which do not meet the plus criteria. Now there's a P-score, that is an objective image grading system from P1 to P9, providing a gradient of plus disease severity. Now, APROP is now termed as AROP. Now there are certain differences. This is iris vascular engorgements which are seen in the fulminant ROPs, and this is a heavy plus seen in all 4 quadrants. This is, there were other terminologies like the immature retina, where the retina vessels ended at a particular stage with a certain amount of plus or pre-plus. Half zone ROP, where the thing was restricted to within the arcades or lesser than that. A hybrid form, which is both forms which had staged ROP as well as AROP features. And the smoldering ROP was another condition, which was a regression of type 2 with a PAR, that is a persistent avascular retina. So hybrid components, this shows the hybrid components over here. And ROP crunch is something which is described after the tractional detachment occurs following an anti-VEGF injections. Now, what is new in this classification and what is the need? Because of variations in presentations, anti-VEGF era, the subjectivity, and the imaging tools. So this allows us to classify aggressive forms, reactivation risk, regression patterns, ensuring that clinicians worldwide would have more precise diagnostic and treatment decisions. So this is what is seen. This zone 2 has been demarcated as a posterior zone 2 and a peripheral zone 2. The stage 5 I already spoke to you about. So this was the first classification, and then the presence of a notch, which is an incursion into the zone 1, and this is the stage 5, all the 3 stages which are seen. Then there's something called as a complete or incomplete regression, which you see over here. That is incomplete regression in stage 3 in zone 2. If it is not immature, it is incomplete vascularization. Reactivation, if there is, and regression patterns. Now this is the peripheral avascular retina, which you see in the periphery of both the eyes. So these are the key updates which were there in the new system. And the recommended guidelines is whom to screen is, as I said, children less than 34, birth weight less than 2,000, and children with a high risk are screened earlier at 3 weeks. First screening is at 4 weeks or earlier at 3 weeks if the situation demands. And follow-up is depending on how the child fares on your examination. If you feel it is a risky thing, then call as 1 weekly, or you can defer it to 2 weekly or 3 weekly. Where and who is that the doctor itself can see, and if there are some kind of trained technicians or DEIC trained optometrists using retinal imaging, they also can do it, but this has to be read by the ophthalmologist after it is done. And the first examination is always in the NICU, and the subsequent ones is after discharge. The procedure for screening is that you obtain a written consent, informed consent. See that the parents understand what you're trying to tell them. The baby should be fed and burped 45 minutes to 60 minutes before screening. Swaddle the baby, restrain the arms, apply a local anesthetist, proparacaine 0.5%, wait for 30 seconds before applying the pediatric speculum, and consider oral dextrose or a sugar pellet when you want to do the procedure. The dilatation is generally done 30 minutes before examination, 2 or 3 times it is put, and the indirect ophthalmoscope with a 20 or 28 diopter lens is used for the procedure. And these are the various speculums which are there, which can be commonly used. Documentation, this is the most important thing. Use a standardized form where you write ICROP, zone, stage, extent in clock hours, presence of plus or pre-plus, where the treatment is indicated, follow-up plan, and findings and management decisions must be clearly documented and communicated to parents in verbal and written forms, including the next screening date, which has to be written in bold letters. Some people go to the extent of even video recording what they have spoken to parents to avoid hassles later. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr. Karubi. We'll quickly move on to our next talk by Professor Parijat Chandra on when to and when not to operate in ROP.